Welcome back to On the Market, York Region's radio real estate show. Over to my co-host and our real estate expert, Asif Khan from Remax Prime Properties, with today's guest. Asif.
Thank you, Tina. Our next guest is Michael Parsa, Ontario's Associate Minister of Housing. Minister Parsa, welcome to On the Market.
Hi, Asif. Thank you very much. Great to be here with you.
Now, Minister, very exciting news about a week ago for buyers and trying to solve the housing crisis in Ontario by building 1.5 million new homes in the next 10 years. Tell our listeners a little bit about this announcement.
Yeah, thanks, Asif. Yes, it's a very exciting time. So right now in Ontario, Asif, as I don't have to tell you, you and your listeners will know, we're in a housing crisis here in the province. We have made a commitment to the people in the last election just 4 months ago that, study after study tells us that we are about just under 500,000 short of homes as it is. In the next 10 years, you can imagine with immigration, our population growing, we're going to need about 1 million more homes. So that puts us about 1.5 million homes that we're going to need in the next 10 years to be able to adequately house people. And as a result, we made a commitment to Ontarians that we'll be introducing a housing bill every year to be able to address some of the challenges and to really expedite the process, which is why when we introduced this bill last Tuesday, it was as a result of consultations with stakeholders, people that are involved, for us to be able to increase the supply of housing. It's to build more homes. It was to address reducing costs, fees, taxes, really to streamline the process of them and to be able to help home buyers and renters who have really, when you look at the dream of home ownership, it's falling more and more out of reach for more Ontarians. And to me, to our government, that's just not acceptable. And we're going to be working with our partners, whether it's the federal government, local government, the private sector, nonprofit, the builders, everyone involved, every single person, all hands on deck for us to be able to solve the crisis that we're in right now.
Minister, you said all hands on deck, and I guess that also includes many parts of this legislation, including building more homes near transit. How does that help in terms of solving the housing crisis?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So when you think about density around transit, so what we want is to have, if you're going to have transit, which if you can think of, for example, in the 4 transit that we have put forward, the Young North, for example. Let's talk about that one because you're in York Region. You're going to have a lot more density around transit, so the people can just walk over and be able to take the subway to get to and from work. And to do that, we need to have, it just makes sense for us to be able to put density around transit stations for people.
And Minister, there's going to be some changes for inclusionary zoning. Tell our listeners a little bit about what inclusionary zoning is and what the changes would be.
Yeah, so it's a tool that municipalities can use to require residential developments to include affordable housing, basically. When we talk about housing, Tina, both yourself and Asif, we're talking about, we're just lack in the entire housing continuum. So we need to make sure we talk about attainable housing. We're talking about rental housing. So this will just be a tool that we will utilize to be able to cut, as I said, fees and taxes to be able to promote, more affordable housing units to come in the market as well.
And can you take us through what you think the impact will be of streamlining the process?
Yeah, so I'll give you some examples. For example, we're proposing to remove the site plan requirements for projects with fewer than 10 units. Another thing is to speed up the decision making, for example, at the OLT, and that's going to be able to help us increase the supply by prioritizing cases, Tina, that are going to be shovel ready across the province. And again, that will help us with all sorts of supply right across the province.
And it's a pretty bold step for the government to take with regards to the announcement and also the changes that have been tabled. Have you seen anything like this in the past, and is this the first of its kind?
If we're in a housing crisis in the province, and it's going to require bold actions for us to be able to address and for us to be able to get out of these crises. And look, through the decisions that were made in the past, the bills that have been put forward, remember, this is the third housing supply action plan that our government has put forward. The other two has shown they work. If you look at the housing starts in Ontario in 2021, we had a record number of housing starts. So in Ontario, we had over 100,000 starts in 2001. The last time we had such numbers was back in 1987. That also helped us with also rental units, the purpose-built rentals. That was also the highest. So we had 13,000 housing starts started in 2021. Again, the last time we had seen these numbers were back in 1991. You do the math. Even at a record number, Asif, it's not going to get us to 1.5 million homes. At 100,000 a year, it's not going to get us there. So we need to take some bold actions, make decisions that's going to get us to 1.5 million homes. Because as I said, we've made a commitment to the people, and letting the people down, letting the future generation down, is just not going to be an option. And also one other thing, we've also, like I said, made a commitment that we're going to be introducing a bill every year to be able to address the issue. So this is now, we're going to continue looking at ways, continue to consult, and find other ways to be able to help with supply over the next few years.
And there was an announcement by the federal government earlier this week that Canada will welcome 500,000 immigrants by the year 2025. Do you think this housing plan then is enough for Ontario?
So if you look at study after study, Tina, it tells us again that we're in a housing deficit right now. The supply that we currently have is just not. About more than 200,000 new Canadians are coming into Ontario every day. We need to make sure that we have all types of housing available to all Ontarians. You know, when you're looking at, again, newcomers coming in, my family, when they immigrated here, the dream of home ownership was within reach. And that isn't the case right now. And we just got to make sure that we don't let them down. They come here with hopes and aspirations. They make our communities better. They contribute in every way. And we need to make sure that we don't let them down. So we're going to continuously look at ways, work with our partners to make sure that we have the adequate supply to meet the demand, when they do arrive. And part of that will require making sure that we have the skilled trades to be able to build the homes. And I can't thank Minister Monty McNaughton, who's doing a great job at emphasizing the importance of skilled trades across the province to make sure that, we have the tradespeople to be able to build these homes that we're going to need. And part of that could be addressed through immigration as well.
Great news indeed, Minister. Now, one of the things that we're dealing with when we're speaking to our buyers is the increase in development charges by municipalities or certain areas where that's being passed along to the end user through the builder. Is there any plans to address that and really bring affordability to the table?
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at development charges, I don't have to tell you, and your listeners would know, these charges are passed on directly to the consumer. And these are high fees that are contributing to the price of housing right now. I mean, you can see studies that talk about, somewhere upwards of $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 added to the price of a unit. And that's what we're looking at. Again, when I was doing my consultations across the province with my colleague, Minister Clark, and the parliamentary assistant, Kevin Holland, we heard this repeatedly, that it's the timeline, the process of how long it takes to get approvals, as well as the fees and charges, which is why we wanted to address both. We wanted to make sure we cut down on the timeline so that we can speed up and expedite the process, but also make sure that some of the fees are either reduced or removed for specific years. For example, I can tell you reducing development charges for a one-bedroom, there'll be a 15% reduction in charge. If it's a two-bedroom, there'll be a 20% reduction in DC. And if it's a three-bedroom, it'll be a 25% reduction. That will help us, again, not only with the process, but to get more housing supply in the market.
And that's fantastic news for buyers. Mr. Parsa, thanks so much for joining us. For those that missed the announcement, where can they find it?
So if you actually go on ontario.ca, you should be able to see it, or you can also contact me directly on my email, which is michael.parsa@ontario.ca, and I'd be more than happy to provide that information to anyone. Or if you have any specific questions about the bill, I'd be more than happy to address it.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us once again.
Asif, Tina, thank you both. I really appreciate it.
When we come back, your questions for Asif Khan. This is On the Market on 105.9 The Region. Stay with us.
Need to connect with Asif Khan from RE/MAX Prime Properties? Call him 416-985-KHAN. That's 416-985-5426. Or email asif@thehomeshop.ca. Now back to On the Market on 105.9 The Region.
Welcome back to On the Market. Time now for our email questions, and we begin with Robert in Thornhill. He's heard the horror stories about landlords trying to evict bad tenants. What does he do now before he rents his property out to protect himself and his investment? Asif, what are your thoughts?
That's a great question, Robert. And you know what? There are some horror stories out there, and quite often these horror stories are caused by professional tenants. And by that, what we mean is tenants that know exactly what they can get away with, exactly how they can stay in a property without paying. And that causes a lot of concern and grief for landlords. The best way to protect yourself is have a professional property management company or a realtor conduct the search for you for the prospective tenant, because they're going to be looking into a lot of the things that are red flags. Quite often people will just put up their property on Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace and think they can find the right tenant. But again, even as realtors, we've heard so many horror stories, and when we get involved after the fact, it really is hard to get rid of that tenant, because the Landlord-Tenant Act really does protect tenants and not landlords, which is unfortunate. The other thing is there's so much of a backup at the board itself that it does take a long time to be able to evict a tenant, and the tenant could damage a property and cause thousands of dollars of damage to the property, which could end up in the landlord having to sell the property. And so I would say it starts right at the beginning. It starts doing the search when you're looking for the right tenant. So make sure that we're covering all the bases, checking credit, checking past history. You never want to call the last landlord. You want to call the one before the last landlord or two landlords ago, because if there's a problem tenant, the landlord that they're with right now is going to want them to move out, so they're going to just say, yes, great tenant, take them on. But you want to go back and do some research, talk to their employer, find out who they are, maybe have some reference checks conducted, make sure you're covering all the bases.
It sounds like a thorough check is really required because, as you said, they could do damage to the property along with not paying rent. So it could end up costing the landlord a great deal.
It really can. And, to give you another story of what happens, you have to be really tight on who's occupying the premises. Because we had a story about a tenant who was a AAA tenant, which means credit was great, job was great, perfect person. However, that person brought in a spouse over the term of the lease who was not a very good person. So, if someone is coming in, you should be conducting a search on the next person too before you allow them to go in, and make sure that they're the right tenants for your property still. And so there's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of protection mechanisms that you can have in place during the tenancy to make sure that you're not going to get scammed.
And I think often there's a misconception out there about landlords. They think they own multiple properties, multiple buildings, multiple developments, when sometimes it is just a single investment that they may have, a single property. So it really does have an impact on them as well when things go wrong.
It sure does. And, it could be the landlord having to rent out of necessity just to make sure that they can cover their costs. In a market like this, not every property is selling. So the landlord may be forced to rent it out just to make ends meet. And if the tenant misses 1 month or even is late by 10 or 15 days or 20 days, it could cause a lot of grief because it could mean the landlord misses a mortgage payment and now there's serious problems for the landlord.
There's also challenges sometimes when you are thinking about purchasing a property and there is already a tenant in the property. How do you handle those situations?
And that's another problem that we're having right now is the rents have escalated so much that when a landlord is selling a property and the tenant has to move out, sometimes it's really hard for the tenant to find a place at the same rate that they're paying right now. And a lot of tenants may not be able to afford more, so they could be left homeless. So that is another prevalent problem, especially in a market like this where rents have been going up 10, 15, 20% month over month. And it's leaving a lot of tenants in a very precarious situation.
Our next question comes from Amr in Vaughan. He is a first-time home buyer and wants to know if there is more inventory for a larger condo or a smaller home or semi in York Region. Asif, what do you think?
Great question, Amber. And right now we have a lot of inventory, a lot more inventory, I should say, than we have in the past couple of years. We're looking at about 2.5 months of inventory as opposed to 0.7 months of inventory a couple of years ago. So there is a lot more selection right now. There's not a lot of new larger condos. There's some older condo buildings that do have large units, but your best bet is probably going to be a small home or a semi if you're looking for space.
And do you think that this listener should possibly wait until the spring where there might be more inventory out there, or do you anticipate that it's likely going to be the same?
Springtime is usually when a lot of the inventory does hit. I know there's a lot of people that are holding out for market conditions to improve before they list because, the one thing is, especially in York Region, there's no necessity for people to sell. So it's not like a typical recession where you have to sell. There's job losses. There's people that really need to get out of properties. A lot of people have equity in their homes in York Region, and so they're holding off until market conditions improve to be able to sell it again. Right now, there's a good window of opportunity for buyers to get into homes before that happens. So whether, if the next interest rate hike is only 0.25% or, if they don't have an interest rate hike in the spring, that's really going to open up the floodgates. And then you'll be competing with all the buyers that are out there for these properties again. So there's a window of opportunity for buyers right now to try and get a deal, and you're going to get not only a good price on it, you're going to get conditions in there like a financing condition or a home inspection condition, because the scary part about going into bidding wars and multiple offers is that you need the property to appraise. Otherwise, you have to put down a lot more money in order to meet the bank's qualifications. So if you want to get out there and start shopping now, it's a good time. You've got a lot of selection out there, a lot more than usual. And even if market conditions do improve and there's more inventory in the spring, the buyers will also be out there. So you'll be competing.
As a reminder, if you have questions for On the Market, hit send anytime to info@1059theregion.com. But Asif, if our listeners prefer to contact you directly, how can they do that?
They can call me at 416-985-5426. That's 416-985-CON.
If you missed any part of our show, go to 1059theregion.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Audible. I'm Tina Cortez. Thank you for listening.
Need to connect with Asif Khan from RE/MAX Prime Properties? Call him 416-985-KHAN. That's 416-985-5426. Or email asif@thehomeshop.ca.